assessing country attractiveness. So this is basically a look at how do multinational companies take a look at countries around the world and think, well, that would be a good place for us to work in, the products to be sold into, etc. So, and what makes it attractive for business or investors? Theoretically, and this is, a country will be attractive to foreign investors if by investing in that country they get a return that is equal to or higher than the risk-adjusted weighted cost of capital. What that basically says is that that companies make a financial and calculation, and also basically measuring the return they're going to get on the risk-adjusted weight of their cost of their capital. So as you know, companies and banks they'll take they risk weight capital, and that's how the regulators will look at it, and their investors, and they'll do that with various formulas that they use. In reality, those are very effective, and almost every large company and every bank will do that. They'll risk weight their capital and do all the different components. But often their decisions to go into other countries are not solely based on can I make that equation work. There are usually bigger things behind that. Just saying, yes, I can make more money. I can invest the same amount of money there and make a little bit more with a relatively similar risk is a big component. It's very important. However, especially for a global company, how that decision affects everything else they're doing, and in the long run, is key. They may determine to absorb some losses early for a longer term position later, or the other way around. I mean, this is very risky, but let's hit it hard right now. We think we can make a lot of money now, and then kind of reassess or maybe even get out in the future. So a lot goes to it. And in banking, a similar thing. Making loans is always they always say, well, you should price according to the risk you're taking. But frankly, having been in banking for most of my life, there's really it's very difficult to charge enough on a loan to cover the real risk of that business. It's a risky business. That's why you get paid. So, and over the long term, you have those oscillations of the market that creates a lot of risk. From time to time, as we've seen recently in the 2008-9 crisis, that the risk was far greater than anyone could have assessed, and you can't price a loan accordingly always. But anyway, the point is, this is a calculation, is a way of looking at it. It's just that other factors may be involved as well. So they're saying their decision in a book says, and companies, they think, now, is the business likely to generate a return equal to or higher than the cost of capital? And what are the favorable or problematic characteristics of the socioeconomic political context? And basically, are the risk of operating in this country acceptable? Now, that I think is very valid. And I look at the same as any kind of business decision you make. You always want to look at the risk reward and cost benefit. What is the risk? What am I going to get out of this? How much it costs, and what can I get? And those are your fundamental things you look at when you're making these sorts of decisions. On slide 3, you say what makes a country attractive for business investors are these factors here, and you see there for the components of country attractiveness. I kind of made this slide to really highlight that. I think this is a good slide to keep around with you and make sure you study this and hold on to it, because this is what companies do look at. They say how easy is it to do business there, and you'll see what kind of things they look at: the taxes, incentives, infrastructure, government contracts, etc. What's the market like? Is it growing? What's the size? What's the quality of customers? Some markets are strong, but they're so tiny you can't do much there. And you really want to depend on your product. Is it big enough? Is it growing? Will it be there for me down the road? The competition, you're looking at the intensity of rivalry, local players, other foreign players, entry barriers, the bargaining power of suppliers, how profitable am I in the short term, long term? Can I even budget there? Is inflation so crazy that it's difficult to budget? Are the swings in is the government supporting their own local businesses to such an extent that I won't be able to compete? Those are things you have to know. Country risk. Well, I'll get to that last. Let's look at resources first. Are there the people you need? Do they have the components of your production? Is the labor there? Is the education level there? All these different things on resources. Am I going to have to send a lot of my resources there? I'm going to get them locally. These are factors that go into your thinking. And then, going back to country risk. Country risk is one of the things, I think it's the one kind of brings it all together. What are the political risks here? What are the economic risks, competitive risks, operational risk, and the reputational risk? If I'm doing business there, like say, if you're doing business in certain countries, what will your other customers and other places think of you doing that business there? Even if you're doing completely legitimate business, does it look good that you're there? Is it positive or negative for you that you're in that country and you're in that market, and you have to weigh that? Then you do all those other risks. The country risk is extremely important, and they always start there with the balance of payments. You really get out the balance of payments graph there, and I think you probably all do this already, but the CIA website is great for that sort of information, and you really see all the components of what that country is all about, and you weigh those things in terms of the risk. And here for investors, for an international business entry, you see the same kind of thing. Intensive rivalry, entry barriers, etc. All these different things, and these are I take these from Porter's Five Forces, and then you see in their book, and they add government policies in there too. And I think that's very valid. You want to look at these 5 things plus the government policies are all go into some of the decision making when you go into a different country. Okay, now what makes it, on slide 5, you see country risk analysis assess the probability that adverse circumstances coming from political, economic, and social actions will negatively affect your business performance. Now, this is very important, and a lot of times people forget. If you've been around longer, like I have, then you remember these things that have occurred in certain countries, and they looked good and they went bad, and then they looked good and they went bad, and it happens over and over again. And sometimes people that have had less experience, and they think, oh wow, it looks really good now, those old days are gone. Sometimes they are, there's no question about it. But other times you're in between ice ages, more or less. You're in between difficult times. And so you have to get some perspective. Or you keep your business very short term, where you're not impacted by these inevitable swings. In certain countries, if you look at what's happened over time, if you go back into the 60s, and you look at it's really a roller coaster, and you can almost start seeing cycles of 3, 5, 7, 12-year cycles in certain countries where things start going not so well, and really it happens a lot. So I think that for you, you should, as you go forward in your careers, be a little cautious about what looks really good. Give it some historical perspective. You may find yourself foregoing some short-term revenue, but you might save some pain down the road. At the same time, you want to, it's a real mix. So you don't want to be so cautious you don't do any business. However, I think being aware of history and aware of how things go in certain countries, it's like people. People can change, but they often tend not to. So countries can change, but they often tend not to. And you see some huge exceptions. Of course, Chile is a huge exception from the old Allende days when it was crazy and communistic. But not every country changes as much as they have, or has done as well as they have in recovering. That what was such a disaster in the early '80s, late '70s. Okay, that's all for this. It's a shorter one, but I think that, again, just to emphasize, when I look at my experience when we used to look at what we're going to do in different countries, the number one focus really is the country risk, and you want to evaluate all the things relative to country risk, put that all together, and then make some assessments on what you'd be willing to invest in there, what you'd be willing to do in that country, and the tenor, how long, and again, and like in all strategy decisions, the less you know, or the more volatile, the less you want to invest, and the shorter you want to invest. If you know a lot and the country is stable, you can invest more and go for longer terms. But that's really kind of the nutshell thing. But I hope you enjoyed that one, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.